Today's May 21st, Monday, May 21st. My name is Tom Dando. I am conducting an oral history interview at Ashland American Legion Post 434 in Ashland, Pennsylvania. And I'm conducting it with John L. Stitzer. Okay, Mr. Stitzer, would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is John L. Stitzer. I live at 302 East Middle Street, Gordon, Pennsylvania.
I'm going to ask you some questions about your service time, and you feel free to comment on anything you would like. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
What branch of service were you drafted?
I was in the combat engineers in the Army.
Do you recall your first days in the military? Tell us about it, like when you left and where you trained and so on and so forth.
Well, I went with a bunch of, I guess you'd call them a bunch of men mostly from Ashland, Gordon, Girardville. We all left the Ashland station April, I think, the 26th, 1943. And from there we went to Pottsville and picked up some more members. And we had 63 members of Schuylkill County stayed with the same outfit all the way through the war, which was very unusual because if it got wiped out, it would hit the region real hard. But the first night we went to New Cumberland, and I think we were there 2 or 3 days, and then we shipped down to Fort Meade, Maryland. This was June, which is very hot and it's sandy down there. I remember we took our basic training in Fort Meade, Maryland, and it really was murder down there. But we made most of our boys were either Pennsylvania or Alabama, Tennessee boys, and we got along well, and we all became very good friends. I don't know what else I could emphasize on the
Well, anything in your basic training, what did that consist of, if you thought?
Well, our basic training, of course, was like all basic training, learning to march. And, of course, in our case, we had to build bridges and fix roads and all that type of thing, besides being infantry and so forth. The combat engineers had a lot to do with the infantry. We fought as infantry, but we also maintained roads and things like that. And then we took our basic training in Fort Meade, Maryland. And from there we went up to Fort Ethan Allen, Vermont, which to us was night and day. Fort Ethan Allen was beautiful. We were up there in the summer. And we did more training up there, qualifying our rifles and so forth. And after, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of the story or not, but from there we went to Tennessee maneuvers as neutral troops. And what we did then, when the fighting was over and they would tear up the farmers' yards or fences, we would go around and repair these the first time. We weren't involved in the combat itself. And from there we went down to Camp Rooker, Alabama for I don't know just how many months, and then we went back to Tennessee again, and this time we were combat. And it rained, I remember a lot there. But from there we went back to Camp Rooker, Alabama, and from there we shipped up to Camp Miles Standish, Massachusetts, where we shipped overseas on what was known then as the USS West Point, and that was the biggest ship that the American passenger fleet had at the time. They called it the West Point. It was originally known as the America. So I don't know, Tom, if you want me to continue that.
Yeah, well, let me just ask you, because it is important to know what war was this?
Oh, well, it wasn't the Civil War.
Yeah.
Not that old. No, it was the Second World War, of course.
Yeah.
And we were, like I said, 1943 when we went in.
And where exactly did you go then when you got on the ship?
Well, we got on the ship and we went up to Scotland. I remember we got off at Scotland, And I remember the date very well because we were going by train from Scotland down into England. And the conductor came by and he says, I want to wish you Yanks happy 4th of July. I don't know why, because you became free from us British at that time. But that's how I remember it was the 4th of July. And we stayed in England approximately a place called Kidderminster. And we stayed there maybe at the most 2 weeks. And then we left and went over to France, and we were on the ship for about a week because a storm had come up and ruined all the docking over there. And we would only be on that ship for like 2 days, but we were on almost a week. And we had very few provisions and all, I remember that. But we landed at Utah Beach, and that was July the 30th. 1944. And I remember that night we were raided by planes, the first night we were there. Of course, they were off the beaches at the time, but the German planes were still bombing and so forth. And we were there. I don't know if you want me to continue on this stories. Or from there we I don't know exactly what we did anymore in France in the beginning, but I remember we were repairing roads and some of our men were hit with bombs and I guess you'd call them booby traps and so forth. We lost a few men there. But then they also bombed a place called St. Lo, which the fighting in France was held up for like 2 months. They expected to take St. Lo within the first or 2 days, and it took them almost a month. And what they did, the airplanes, I remember when we landed, like 10,000 airplanes flew over us and concentrated their bombing around St. Lo. And the Germans were so shook up, I guess you'd call it, that we just more or less walked through there. And when they finally did get through St. Lo, most of the army went left toward Paris, but our outfit was with Patton, and we went up along the coast in Brittany up to Brest, and we fought as infantry all the way up the Brest Peninsula. And we were up, I don't know, I'm guessing again, about 3-4 weeks up along Brest we fought as if, I remember we were along the coast and our job was to clean up the mines. And an incident I recall very well, we were supposedly surrounded and we didn't have too many provisions. And we didn't have cigarettes, I remember, and candy and things like that. And I looked out, now I'm a boy from Pennsylvania, didn't know what tides were in the ocean. And there were 2 ships, and they were up on land. And I said, what are they doing here? Well, I didn't know it at the time, but the tide, they came in with the tide, and when the tide went out, they were sitting on the beach. And I heard Navy officers say to one of our Army officers, we didn't know who was here, the Germans or the Americans. But he said we kept watching from out in the ship, and they finally saw a Jeep going by, so they came in. And I was elected to go out to the ship and get provisions. And I went out and those Navy guys treated me, you wouldn't believe. You think I was John Wayne. They gave me anything I wanted. They took me down to their store, they called it, and they gave me bags of cigarettes and candy. And I remember getting off the ship, the tide came in. And I said to the sailor, how am I supposed to get in the shore? Oh, he said, it's not deep. He got a pole and stuck it in the water. And I went down the plank, and I remember the water was up to my neck, but I held the provisions up, and I was well liked in our outfit for a few days because I had all the cigarettes and candy. But then we moved on up from there up to Brest, and we, as I say, we fought knocking down roadblocks, things like that. And that was until, this was, I guess, August, and it's the end of September roughly, we went across France through Paris, Belgium, up into a little place called Luxembourg, the country of Luxembourg, and we were there as maintenance troops, and that was supposedly the rest area, and it was. It was just like being at home. We would went to bar rooms and we have ice cream and things, but we maintained all the roads, plowing the snow or whatever. And I would go into Bastogne, it was only about 3 miles away, and we'd go in there just like you might visit Harrisburg from here or something. And of course then the bulge came, and we were told to get out of this place and take only what you had with you. And we moved up to the front alongside the Battle of the Bulge, and we were attached to the 4th Infantry Division. And we held off the Germans around Luxembourg City for 3 or 4 days. And there's a plaque there. I was over in 2003. I was lucky enough to get back, and they have a big plaque there thanking us for what we did and the 4th Infantry Division. And of course after that, I know our outfit helped to free the concentration camp of Buchenwald. And that was one of the first concentration camps that were freed. And I have pictures, quite a few that I took myself there with the bodies and the ashes and furnaces and so forth. It was a sight no one would believe unless you had pictures of it. And of course we fought on and on through up until we got into Austria, is when the war ended. And we had to get out of there to let the Russians in, and we moved back to Antwerp, Belgium, where we built a place called Camp Top Hat, which was a camp to send the men home. I got home roughly, I got out of the service in Indian Town Gap December the 19th, 1945.
Do you remember the day, I don't know how this would happen, but the day the war ended, how did you find that out, that they said the war's over, and where were you? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. That's sad to say. I think I was in Erfurt, Germany, but I don't recall that. We were just so pleased and happy that it was over. But that's an odd thing. I remember when Pearl Harbor, where I was that day, and I remember, of course, getting what day I left over there and so forth. I went over in 6 days, but it took me 14 to come home. But I'm sure most of the guys would tell you where they were and what they did. And I just can't pinpoint that, how it happened. I don't really just...
Do you remember, you talked about the Battle of the Bulge, when the Bulge came, and the two things I want to ask, were you expecting anything like the Bulge?
Nothing. We had no inkling whatever. In fact, we were running sawmills and stone quarries and keeping the roads open and everything. And I remember one of our guys came back and he said he never saw so much armor in his life as up in Bastogne. And like I said, we were right near Bastogne. We never saw any troops there, only a few. But we had no idea what he was talking about. And that's when the 101st came in, but we didn't know anything about the Battle of the Bulge when it hit. And we were right in the path of them, so we had to get out of. I was in a place called Beckborn in Luxembourg, and the people there were wonderful. By the way, when I get back in 2003, I was lucky enough to get with a friend of mine who had a bus to chartered, and he took us with him. But in Luxembourg, in fact, they give every one of our guys a medal, and everywhere we went, they had a lunch or did something for us. They just could not do enough for us. In fact, there's an outfit over there called SEBA. Now, exactly what those initials mean, I'm not sure. But if any one of our guys today would go over there, and they would let them know, the Sieve outfit, they would take the boy anywhere they want to go free. They just can't do enough for us today yet. We have letters from our outfit from people over there that has to be read to appreciate what the people think of not only our outfit, but the people that liberated them. It has to be read to be appreciated. They cannot thank us enough. And they are, as I say, wonderful people.
I know that from our conversations, you were wounded at some time or place.
I was wounded in the battle of the place, in a little place called Schleigen. They were shelling us a lot at that time, and we were surrounded. And every time we went to get out, I was driving a truck, and every time we turned our truck around, they would shell us. They had to have a spotter there somewhere. But I remember a shell hit right alongside of my truck and hit my leg. The whole truck lit up, and one of the guys in front of me, he got hit in the steering wheel. I remember he lost his fingers. Anyway, we run in a barn, and when I went to run, the shell knocked the gun out of my hand and knocked my helmet off. But anyway, I was so lucky that day. The guys cut my pants leg, and they said, "You're all right." By that time, a shell landed alongside of us and knocked these three guys, I didn't know them, back in the end of the cow stall. I thought they were dead, but they shipped them. It was just the concussion knocked them out. But when I was out, my truck was gone, so I jumped in this armored car that these three guys were in charge of, and I got out with them. We get into a place called Kunsdorf, but the shooting was all over the place at that time. But we lost a lot of men in a place there at Schleigen called Hill 313, where we held off, as I said, the Germans with the 4th Infantry Division. And we were got quite a few comments, compliments on that from the Army and so forth.
I know you talked at one time regarding a captain that you knew and liked that was killed, and another friend. You want to tell us about that a little bit?
Well, I had a Captain Chapek, his name was, and I woke up in the morning in a house and there were strangers there. And they happened to be with Patton's Third Army. They came up from South France to relieve Bastogne. And a captain came in and he said to his men, "Now men were expecting a counterattack shortly, and we heard there's 3 Tiger tanks cross the creek down here." And he says, "We get on the housetops and throw grenades. We don't have any bazookas," but it's just like at halftime at football, and I didn't know what he was talking about. But anyway, a little later they left, and I'm there by myself. So I walked down to our CP, and this Captain Chapek, and I said, "Sir, I just heard there's 3 Tiger tanks cross the creek down here." And I'll never forget, he looked at me, he said, "Stitzer, just what am I supposed to do about that?" I said, "I don't know, sir. I thought you should just know that." But right after I left him, he went out on Hill 313 with a fellow by the name of McGee, who was his radio man. Well, during the battle, Captain Chapek was killed, and supposedly this McGee from Pottsville was killed too. It's a story I tell because I think it's so odd. So I had my picture taken with this McGee before the bulge, and after the bulge I got his picture to send to his parents, since he had been killed. So after the war, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, Beryl, and I were up dancing up at Lakewood, and a big band area, and there might have been, I'm guessing, 4,000 or 5,000 people on that dance floor. It was big. And I bumped into a man, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir." And I turned around, and who was it but McGee? And I said, "I thought you were killed." He says, "No, I was taken prisoner." To this day, I would have thought he was killed in the battle, but he was taken prisoner. So he left this area later, so I don't know what happened to McGee, but it was something I always thought about, because bumping into him after all those people, it just seemed a little odd to me.
How was it in terms of keeping in touch with your family or your now wife or your girlfriend then? Did you hear from home a lot, or?
Well, we got regular mail call, of course, but it took, in those days, it was no airplane delivery or anything like that. It may, I don't remember exactly anymore, but I would say it took 10 days maybe to get a letter back or forth. But yeah, we kept in touch, and there were, of course, times when you didn't have time to write. And during the bulge, especially, we were fighting in the snow, and it was tough. There was no question about it. And we lost a lot of boys through frozen feet and so forth. But now that you mention it, Tommy, I just found this. And maybe you people, a lot of people don't know about it. I don't know where I put it now. It's a V-mail. I have it here somewhere. But here it is. This was a big thing in its day. Now that's a regular letter that you write, but then they had it condensed so that they could get more mail on the ship or whatever. That's what they called a V-mail. This is one I sent to Mrs. George Lynch, which was a cousin of mine in Minersville. That's the only one I think I have anymore. But yeah, that was the only communications in those days with mail, of course.
Jack, being from Gordon, did you ever get any of the letters from Reverend Harris?
In fact, I think I have every one of them today.
Can you talk a little bit about how that took place and what it was like to receive that information?
Reverend Harris was a Lutheran minister in town, and he was there in town for about 30 years. Of course, everyone knew Reverend Harris, and but he was in the First World War. In fact, he was gassed. He had only, I think, one lung, but he sent out a monthly bulletin of who got married, who died, who had children, who was home, and where they were stationed, and we look forward to that, every one of us. Now he must have sent out, I'm surmising, there was 200 and some from Gordon alone that were in the service. So he did this all on his own through contributions that people gave him for the expenses. But I think if I don't have them all, I have pretty well all of them. Did you never see any, Tom?
Yeah, I have copies of them.
Oh, do you? Yeah, well, I think I have pretty well every one of them. And they were just, we look forward to they're getting these letters every month. It was fantastic.
Did you share them with guys from other areas?
Oh, yeah.
And how did they feel about those?
Well, and then the guys from my town, there were three of us from Gordon, and one was Walter Kaufman and Bob Wolfgang, and they were in different companies. We very seldom got to see. You had your own bivouac area or whatever. Once in a while we'd run into each other, but I can't say that I just read these letters to more or less strange guys, because they wouldn't understand it anyway. But after the war, he made a book too, with everybody's name and picture in that book, where they were, if they were wounded or whatever happened to them. And I have one of them, and they're a prize that I cherish today very, very much.
I have my own copy. I feel the same way about it. When you got home, Jack, after the service, do you remember the day you came home? And tell us a little bit about the day you came home, and then what you did after that.
Well, when I got home, I got out, I remember December the 19th, right before Christmas, and there were a few days, I'm not sure what I did, but we celebrated, I remember that. And After that, my dad had a lumber yard. My dad passed away, by the way, while I was in the service, and he was only 52. I got home for the funeral, though. But I came home and I worked in a little lumber yard, and at that time there wasn't a whole lot of business because everything was war-oriented. Even paint, things like that were scarce. But then I went to Kutztown. I got in Kutztown College, and I was there a year and a half, and I have to admit it's the biggest mistake I ever made. I quit school to go back to the lumber yard. But I was there about 20 years, and things were all right. I enjoyed it. But then it was a distressed area type thing, and things were going downhill. So I got a job with this home distributor called Ajax Products from Boyertown. And I was with them for 20 years, and that's where I ended up my working. So I've been retired since then.
You know, you've talked a bit, Jack, about questions I've tried to ask you. But is there anything that you would want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet? That you might, some special memories about, we talked earlier maybe about anything that you did for good luck, or any special memories that you have that you would want to make sure that we all...
Well, you know, while you're in there, it's tough, there's no question about it, but when you look back, it's like, we made so many friends, and we were out perhaps, I forget how many years, a good 20, before we ever had our first reunion. And we had 17 or 18 reunions every year in a row. And it got to the point where we lost so many members through age, of course. And this is 2003. I think our last reunion was roughly 2000 perhaps was our last one. Then we had dinners, local dinners, and it got to the point where we couldn't even get enough of those anymore. But we made so many friends, especially the boys down south, and we had a wonderful companionship. We just enjoyed each other's company. But you build a bond, there's no question. When you're in the service, as we were, and we're together over 3 years, we build a bond that's hard to break, I'll tell you. And they were wonderful boys.
Jack, how does it make you feel when, I'm sure you've heard this terminology before, but Tom Brokaw describes you guys as America's greatest generation. How does it make you feel when you hear them?
Well, of course it makes you feel wonderful. And you know, when I look back and the people at my age look back, how close we were to actually losing the war. They say World War, that's exactly what it was when you look back on the district now, where it all took place, the Pacific Ocean, the Aleutian Islands, of course Germany and Africa. There was war all over the world at that time, and our boys were in it every step of the way. It's inconceivable how it could have happened, how that turned. Can you imagine Germany, when they invaded Russia? I just heard it on TV the other night. 3 million troops invaded Russia, German troops. I'm just thinking, what could we have done if they would have been on the beach at D-Day? You know, how many people can you lose and still fight wars? There was millions and millions of people, and how many died, you know.
You talked about Patton, you know, you were with Patton's army for a while. Did you ever happen to see him?
I saw him twice. He was, as they picture him, he was I was going to not say show off, I guess that would be the word. But I remember one day it was pouring down raining, and the siren was blowing and what's going on? He came right by me on his Jeep, standing up in the rain with his pistols and, but he was standing up in the Jeep with the, he went right by me, but that's as much as, he never asked me for any advice or anything like that.
Is there any particular memory that would be your saddest memory or your most fun memory of your service?
Well, at the time, I guess the fun memory was the day I got my discharge. But no, some people enjoyed it. The service itself was wonderful to the extent that you found out about friendship and you tried to help your brothers and so forth. I don't know which, when you're first ready to go into combat, I think would have to be one of the saddest things. After you don't get used to it, but it's you get to the point that it's not like the first time. The first time you're really shook up that you know you're going into combat. But no, I can't say there was a whole lot of I wanted to get out or something like that. You wanted to stay with the boys, you know.
Memorial Day's coming up real soon. And I know you attend all the Memorial Day services in Gordon. Are they any different for you now than before you served?
Before I served?
Before you went into the military and they had services?
Well, I remember when I was a little boy going around town with a drum. It was Memorial Day, beating on that drum. I don't think I was more than 8 years old anyway. But I remember when, right after the war, when we had Memorial Day, we had more men in that parade, and you know, they just got out of the service, so they were sharp, you know, when they hollered attention, you know, it was great. Today, it's still there, the feeling, of course, but of course, the little town, they can't afford a whole lot more. And what we do have Tommy Dando as a speaker every year, and thank goodness we have Tommy, he's terrific. But I don't know what else to say about that.
No, that's good, Jack. We're just, you know, we appreciate you taking the time to do this, because this is an important message that has to be told by you guys. And I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to say, you know, if there was any special message you have for the youth of this country, or for, you say it now, and you know, it's fine. But if you don't, if you're finished, that's fine also.
I think the one thing that most people, I think, when the flag goes by, I remember we all felt proud and so forth. But to this day, after the service and what we saw, and what more or less everyone did for the country, you know the sacrifices were made. When that flag goes by, you could almost cry. That's the way it is.
Okay, Jack. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh. Are you tired?
No,
That was good, Jack.
that was great.
Yeah, it was
very
great.
interesting.
Very natural.
So interesting.
The only thing that, and I'm not sure if I'll do that now, Jack. I know you have pictures. I'm going to try to figure that out with my camera so that I could take those pictures, Rosita.
Can we copy them? Can we get them copied somewhere?
Yeah, I'm sure we could go to Staples or something one day, Jack, and we'll get them copied. That would be a good, but I'd also try to get
But
them.
you want to include them in
If
the
I can,
video.
but either way,
If there's a way to do it.
well, I know this takes pictures, you know, but
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
ready.
I'm just wondering if,
You know, what we want to do is give you a copy of this, but we're also going to give you, Rosita will do like this is already in writing now, Rosita, isn't it?
yeah, it's in here.
It's already there. It's already
have you-
typed up. Everything you said is
It's
there.
not perfect. Some of the things I don't have in my dictionary, but. Let me find you.
So what we'll try to do is add these pictures either to the DVD or at least put them in this format and
Well,
what
I
we'll
want to
get to.
thank you people for taking your time to do this.
No,
I think
this
it's
is,
fantastic.
Actually, I wanted to do it for a long time, and then I was talking to Rosita about it one time, but I wanted to have it in print, and she volunteers her
You
time
know,
to do this.
What sticks in my mind, Tom, I don't know if I ever told you, I think I did, but there was a General Stitzer in the Civil War, Francis Stitzer, and it's in the book, Schuylkill County.
Okay.
I have it at home. And I met him 3 or 4 times. He was relation to my dad, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
I think he might have been my grandfather's brother or something. And do you ever hear of the last encampment, it was called?
I heard the term, but
The last encampment was in 1938. They had it at Gettysburg, and the blue and the gray got together. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Now these men had to be, at that time, 90 years old.
yeah.
The war was over 35 and 38, that's 72 years after the war.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, and they were there, they had tents set up, the government did it. And they had nurses and they had basins where they wash. I never forgot that.
Yeah,
Dad took me down.
Oh, okay.
It was called the last encampment, and General Stitzer was there. Do you ever hear of the First Defenders?
Yeah, I heard of that.
First Defenders were the Pottsville boys. When Lincoln called for volunteers
Okay, all
to protect Washington, they were the First Defenders. And they left Washington, and they had a black guy with them,
Bill.
Bill,
Nicholas
who was
Bill.
stoned to death in Baltimore. But General Francis Stitzer was the last living First Defender.
Wow.
He died in Denver, Colorado. I think he was 99.
God. Now, Rosita, I'm going to get